So many of you are already ahead of me in the comments that yes, my first paper in my dissertation was on what are the unwritten rules of work based on your class background, and I also looked at how there were differences between race and gender groups in the study. But the second paper was on, do these unwritten rules fit into the white supremacy culture framework? So these are the characteristics. This is not my framework. This was done by Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones. They actually started this in the 90s, but from this picture is from their 2001 publication, and this built on work from mostly Black authors for decades. So this is not my framework. I didn't invent it. For my second paper, my dissertation, I looked at, are the unwritten rules that I've been talking to people about, do those map onto these? And several of them did. Notice that these are seemingly things that we don't think about when we often think of white supremacy. I know, at least as a white person myself, we often think of certain groups that I probably can't name on TikTok that have extreme cases of violence. And white supremacy is always violence, but it can show in much more subtle ways. And what I tried to do in that paper, or what I did do in that paper, is give examples from my participant stories on how things they said happened at work that fit into these categories. So for example, I already talked about the unwritten rules. The idea behind them is that there's only one right way, and I got that from this framework here, and that is why the second paper of my dissertation is called One White Way, because I think I'm funny. But also that was the number one most prevalent grouping across all of my participants, including the white ones, including the white men as well. And something that we need to keep in mind is that white supremacy does not impact groups the same way at all. Of course not. It's always going to harm people of color more. But white supremacy is toxic for all of us. It's poison in the water, and it may be diluted for some of us, but none of us really benefit from, well, no, there are definitely benefits that white people benefit from, but it's also harms. And there's a lot I could talk about with that. And there's a lot of people who have already talked a lot about that. One of these I'm really passionate about working with my clients on and talking about is the either or thinking. I think this is because I'm from a very different background than where I am now. I was raised in a very rural southern part of North Florida that isn't exactly known for being friendly to these concepts, and I wasn't friendly to them. And now clearly I've dove into this work and have very different thoughts on it, but I still have family and people I've known growing up who probably think I've fallen off my rocker, and we have a lot of discussions about this. And something people say to me a lot is, you don't really fit into a box, like you're not one or the other. And there's a difference between right and wrong, and like assuming that there's only two groups of people, and there aren't. I think that's in the modern world of like technology and algorithms, and the algorithms show us what we want to see and what we want to click on. It can feel like there's only two, and there are definitely times in life where there are clear decisions to be made between right and wrong. There's a lot where it's not, and I also see a lot of people talking about what they think the other side thinks, and it's not always accurate. Sometimes it is, but until we have conversations with people, we don't know what they think. And so I think one way to get out of either or thinking is by having what I call courageous conversations about these sticky topics. And a lot of us are not good at that because we don't like being wrong and we're afraid of it. And I say that from experience. I know I used to be afraid of it, and I still get a gut feeling, but it's worth learning and growing. You see, you connect with people a lot more when you're willing to hear their story. And you certainly have a healthier work environment when you can get out of all this. White supremacy is always wrong, to be clear. This is just an example of how either or thinking can uphold systems of oppression by dividing us and not talking about it, or thinking there's only two options instead of looking at the more innovative or multi-dimensional approach, or several approaches that need to be made, because there's not a one-size-fits-all usually.